Good morning. I thought I would just show you how I handle a certain job. This is the typical stuff that comes in every day. Customer sends in pictures of information that was on a vehicle or something. So I have to make that printable. I use Photoshop for most of my stuff, and I'll show you how easy this is. I'm going to just crop it down, getting out dark areas, coming close into the art. I don't need anything extra in there. Click enter. And then now I go to changing my size, because although this is a pretty good large file, in Photoshop I like to work with a 600 resolution. So first thing I'll do is uncheck resample. This is going to scale things down proportionately. So if I want this to be roughly about from there to there, let's say 12.25, and that you see how the resolution changes? That just increases the resolution from like 72, and it adds the resolution in there based on the size reduction, because I have unchecked resample. So 12.5 takes it up to 222, and some people might use that for artwork in raster files, but I don't. Everybody knows that it's suggested to use 300 resolution at actual print size, and then I'll even take that up to 600, and you can see the change in here. And you can also use these other resample methods here. They've improved this a little bit and made a couple other options in the last few versions. I like to use bicubic smoother enlargement, sharper reduction, and sometimes for hard edges I might use nearest neighbor. Click OK. And so this is the file size that I'll be working in. And right away I want to copy this area here, the tree, and just work on that by itself. So that's in RGB right now. I'm going to I'll show you this little thing here that happens a lot. But so I made a selection over that tree and copy. And I'm going to paste into, click on new channel in my channels, paste into there. And this way I can just isolate this and adjust it as needed. Dragging it in. You see as you get closer, you get these little fuzzy jagged edges from your low resolution JPEG. And you can kind of blow it up and look at it closely and find a point where you don't want to fill it in too heavily like that, because that's going to leave rougher edges when you burn it out. So in order to smooth that out a little bit, I balance it out and burn this open as best I can. You don't want to leave any gray area, because if you don't burn it in, fill it in solid enough, and you look at this, you see these gray tones in there, and that's going to show up even more when you convert to halftones, and it'll open up a little bit more like that once you have dot gain compensation built in to your film output or your director screen output. And so there, I'll clean that up a little bit too. I have my smoothing really high on there. You can so back to levels, you can bump those shadow tones up. This is bumping the shadow tones or filling it in, making it more solid, and this is burning it out I guess those are old school terminologies, but from using a stat camera. But you did the same thing in a stat camera. You would overexpose and underexpose. Underexposing would be fattening things up, and overexposing would be burning things out. So you see this is hard and solid, but still it's kind of rough. So once you do that, another cleanup tip is you can then blur the image just a little bit. Filter, blur, Gaussian blur. Click on, see a little box, click on the edge there and you can get a better, closer preview of what that's really looking like and how it impacts the different amounts of blur, how that much that impacts your edges. So I just I click around till I start to see a pretty decent fuzzy edge overall, and then I'll come back in and adjust those again, and you can see that I'm starting to lose those rough edges. For a lot of people, this would be the most they would do with that and print that, because you got to move on, get to the next job, right? But this is personal preference, but I like to come in and clean up some of those areas with the pen tool. And some areas, you may have to draw with the mouse using black in the foreground, and you're actually painting pixels. You see I use the hard brush on here because I don't want to use the airbrush, because then I'll be painting in softer, fuzzier edges. And so when you do that and you look up here, it's actually creating grayscale pixels on the edge, which in turn, when you convert to halftone, ends up being like a dot. They're trying to form a couple dots here along the edges, and then it starts to look jaggy or rough. So I like to use the hard pixel brush and come back in and paint. So you see how solid that is. Even though it looks jagged because of the resolution, you're really blown up in here really high, and so you definitely won't see this in print. You'll see a sharp, clean edge along there. This is the same with bitmap separations. When you have type in there, your edge can be fuzzy, and whether you have, that's another thing is, when you bring type in or something, try to bring it in and place it with type that is with anti-aliasing turned off, and that'll give you a very hard, sharp edge on your type. So there's a little bump down here that I don't like, and I'll smooth that out just a little bit. I'm taking, for the lack of a better term, artistic licensing, and I can just clean it up a little bit, smooth things out where I really think it kind of looks atrocious. And I can click here and hold down the shift key and drag up, and that'll give me a straight line, like click, click, and see that just drags straight from wherever I click one point over to another point. And if I click and hold down the shift key in the middle of that, you see it snaps. So this is just another little tip of cleaning up. And for many people, this might be just becoming too anal for them. But I guess that's kind of why people are happy with my work, my results, because this is the stuff that I do. I come back in, I clean things up, make things nice and presentable, a little better than the average person, I guess. Sometimes where I'm at a certain resolution blowing up in the artwork, I kind of squint my eyes to determine if that will really be seen or not in print on the shirt, because a lot of this stuff gets hidden. By the time you add shirt texture in there and wet ink smashing around, and you add another color over top of that, and it's getting stepped on and getting smashed around even more, these edges kind of soften up a lot, and you don't see a lot of the imperfections. So that looks pretty good. And at this point, I'll just save my art file, call it working file, and click save. I can even name the channel Tree, and that'd actually be a green tree, separate color. And this is this type here. There's a couple ways to approach this. If you happen to be lucky enough to get a good photograph to where the type is pretty clean, and let's say the art is your photograph is not distorted too much, like this we can straighten out. Some of it's a little distorted, but if we didn't want to look for this particular typeface and use this as artwork, it's pretty large and pretty clean, so you can kind of manipulate the layers enough and come back in and use this. But there are certain areas where you have to come back in and clean up. Most people would prefer to retypeset it, myself including, but that's a little too easy, and I need to show you how I would handle certain things. So just erase that. See, I toggle back and forth with black and white in my painting on an individual channel. So I type in the X key, and that gives me black or white. And I increase my brushes size, for different areas. Come in here real tight, go type in B for brush, and I can reduce the size of that brush. I don't know what the keys are called, but I'm calling them brackets. They're just up under your, next to my letter P on my keyboard. So I type right bracket or left bracket to increase or decrease the size pretty quickly. This is pretty rough. This might be getting to the point where I would just retypeset that. Too much to clean up. Now you can take the pen tool and create an oval shape in here. That will be pretty clean. But again, it depends on how much you want to screw around with it. Now I'm holding down the Option key because there's a particular feature I want to add on to a point, maintain my left side, and this right side, while holding down the Option key, is dragging me another anchor point out here that I can reshape this with. And now I click on this left side and I can realign that. And that just gives me an oval shape, nice clean path. And then I'll double click on that and make a selection. If you hold down, let me deselect that. If you hold down anywhere in here, like this will select any path that's in there. But if you want to, if you got multiple paths in this one layer of paths, you can activate it and then click on the particular one that you want to activate. Make a selection of it. Now you can also do that same thing, and you can Option click on this marching ants icon to make this selection, and it brings up your preferences. So I can make this selection really fuzzy. Let's say 5 pixels and anti-aliased. Now what happens when you do that, you do get a fuzzy edge. So you can kind of control your selections that way. So you see there's my path again. So I'm clicking on that path and I'm going to say I want an Option click and I want a new fuzzy selection. Actually no fuzziness on it. And it gives me a hard pixel selection. And when you paint on that, you'll see it fills that in nice and hard and nice and solid. And I'll show you the selection there. And then you can reverse that selection. Of course, this isn't what I would normally do, but you can reverse that selection. Command-Shift-I. Okay. So now I'm painting on the outside of my selection. So you could edit this and with putting white in the foreground and come around and circle and paint all of this out. Now this is, again, not what I would normally do, but I'm just showing you different things you can do in the selection. And that alone may be confusing you, but I'm just trying to give you an idea of all the different options that you can use as a tool. See, now I have this as a selection, for example. So with black in the foreground, I can delete that out. And there's what I wanted to show you later. Earlier on, I came across something I didn't want to do because I wanted to show you the reason why I do that. So here, this will pop up and it'll say content aware, and then it'll ask you what do you want to fill it with. You can avoid all that. That's kind of an annoying box. You can avoid that by coming in and double clicking on your background and making it a live active channel. And you see that changes. You see it's kind of it's locked right now and you can't really work with it. So a lot of the things that you do in channels will be based on what is available in layers. So click OK. And now I can come in to this one and modify this one by filling it with white in the foreground. And I don't get that little box window that pops up. And so then now I've reversed my selection. And I'm going to paint with black. And I'm painting along the edge here. And now when I deselect, that makes that a crisp, clean edge in there. I use paths a lot, and you'll see a lot of the good illustrators and separators will use paths, and that's a major tool for making selection areas. Same thing with this over here. You can then duplicate that and kind of get this same shape over here, but now you want to manipulate this. So that you kind of follow suit with the look of this letter C. Even while that's selected, you come over here to your selection icon, make the selection, reverse it, paint on the inside with black. That's filling that in solid. Reverse it again, now you're filling on the inside. Put white in the foreground so you're painting with white. See, in channels you can paint black or white, and only the black content is going to be live editable artwork, whether that's a gray pixel or a solid black pixel. In layers, you would actually be painting with white. So white would be selectable. Let's say, for example, if I made a selection, came in on a new layer and had that filled with black, and so I'm in RGB because I'm in layers, so that's automatically an RGB. That's why you see these three select up here, RGB, the red, green, and blue, and this is the composite. That is what layers is made up of. And so this is black in here, but the little checkerboard shows that there's nothing in the background, nothing behind it. And that's why you can create another layer, drag it below, and you can paint with white. And this white, if you use the magic wand tool and select it, that's selectable. If you did that in channels, that would not be selectable. Only this black area would be selectable. So that confuses people a lot when they're working with channels and layers. And then because that white is painted on a separate layer, I can treat that individually, and then I can delete it also. But it's time for me to move on and get this thing done. And I probably will typeset it, and it's probably something simple like Garamond or Times Bold or Cooper. And then I'll manipulate that.